Before I ever moved to the Midwest and called it my home, I grew up in Austin, Texas. And I loved growing up in Austin. This was before Joe Rogan moved there. This was before Whole Foods blew up, and originally an Austin, Texas business. I've said it before, it was Whole Foods when I was growing up as a young kid was a large open air tented market with organic produce in cardboard boxes with smelly hippies selling it in do-rags. And I used to bike everywhere in downtown Austin. And as soon as I got old enough and came back from college, because I went to college in Texas A&M in College Station, close to, on the way to Houston. And as soon as I got back from college, I was just craving the downtown city life. I wanted more action. I was in my 20s and I went to go work for an advertising agency in downtown Austin. I loved it. It was on 8th and Brazos, if you know Austin very well, and it was an advertising firm that managed Lone Star Beer and NASCAR and some other cool companies. And I had some friends that moved to New York City, and I was just the unknowing part of moving to New York City and what that city could possibly mean. I had acted in plays when I was a kid around Austin, Texas, when I was younger, and done some other entertainment stuff. And so I'd always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to pursue entertainment. And my parents were dead set against it because they didn't think I was from the right family. My dad, funny guy, he was like, "You're not Jewish, you're not any of these things that would make it easy for you and to go into entertainment. So you should probably just stick to business, work hard, and yada, yada, yada." Well, of course, you got to follow your dreams. And I was producing music at the time, and I had a buddy who had gone to film school in Austin and was working for MTV. And he really admired my music production. I was doing hip hop music. And he wanted me to help him do hip hop music. So he said, "Come move to New York City if you really want to, man." He had had that conversation with a lot of people, and I don't think he was really taking me seriously, but he really respected me. I think he just had heard a lot of people talking like that and hadn't seen much action from any of his peers. And so as soon as I saved up about $5,000, boy, I was on the plane. I didn't even call him up till it landed. I had nowhere to stay. I called him up, and fortunately he let me come crash, I think on his couch. It's hard to remember now. Maybe they had an extra room, I'm not sure. And I crashed with them in the financial district, so kind of the southern tip of Manhattan, the island, and began looking for an apartment and doing music and just beginning my New York adventure. It was so amazing. I remember calling both of my brothers when I got there because they had never really lived. I was in my 20s still, and they had never really lived in any place outside of Texas either. And I was just blown away by how tall the buildings were, how many things they were going on. Honestly, it made me feel autistic to be in New York City. I seriously felt autistic just because there's so much going on. You almost are doing double takes, cracking your neck every second. People are putting stickers everywhere. There's so much art. There's people wearing crazy clothes. You know, in New York City, if you go there, there's really no fashion that doesn't work. You can literally wear dirty clothes inside out and people will say, "I love your style." Everything works in Manhattan. It's so cool like that. And there's new concepts for food and drink all the time. You know, only in New York City you could see a restaurant where it's like all chocolate milk with sprinkles in it and different types of chocolate milks. And somehow it works in New York City and everyone goes there to buy chocolate milk with different types of candy in it. It's just a crazy place like that. I remember thinking to myself once, because obviously New York City is one of the oldest places in the United States and it's changed so many times. The island of Manhattan is so small. So in any particular block, I mean, it's completely the entire island. There's, unless it's a park, there's really no space that's unoccupied or hasn't been occupied for many years, meaning in any block over the decades, it's probably had every single business type in that block on that spot where you're standing. Every single type of business. And so any place you're standing in Manhattan has probably at one point been every type of business. And it's just a wild thought to think of. And I was wearing these Dutch shoes. I had spent my senior year living abroad in the Netherlands, which was an amazing experience. And I had bought these Dutch shoes that I loved because I learned how to speak Dutch while I was studying abroad, and I instantly got a job. Well, my first job was working for this clothing company called French Connection UK, or FCUK, FCUK. It was a funny logo. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. I don't even know if they're still around. I think they are. But I quickly got fired from that job because there was a lady who was my mid-manager. This company was crazy. They had mid-managers and top managers, and you had to stand in a zone, which was like a 6-foot bubble that they would tell you where to stand in the store. And if you left the bubble, a mid-manager would come by and say, you need to get back in your zone. And they were paying me $10 an hour, I think in 2006, to live in Manhattan, which was absolutely insane. There's no way you can survive on that. I had moved to Bushwick and was living in this little neighborhood that close to Maria Hernandez Park, if I remember correctly, on Willoughby, a new development, and owned by this guy named Ken. And I had a roommate who was a nurse and was studying at NYU, and then an upstairs roommate whose name was Anton, and he did the knitwear collection for Walmart. Faded Glory is the brand. And I would always be woken up at like 6 a.m. in Bushwick to people playing Keisha Cole over their loudspeakers. And honestly, New York City is what got me used to hearing jackhammers and all these different things at all times of the day. Music blasting in Brooklyn, a lot of crazy sounds. And so that really got me used to being able to sleep through anything. So that was cool. But I instantly got a job working for the Dutch shoe company after I got fired from French Connection for saying we were getting slave wages. My mid-manager fired me. She was a Latina woman, and she had married a white guy, and she told me that her parents had been so proud to come here and they would never say slave wages. It was like right in the dawn of political correctness, so she totally jumped down my throat for saying we were getting slave wages because of the implications that word had. I called up an old friend of mine in Austin who I had met walking one day in Austin, and I'd stayed in touch with her. Her name was Lila, and she told me, just call her. So this mid-level manager had said, go home for the day, I'm pissed at you. And I talked to Lila. I said, Lila, what do I do? And she said, just call her up and say, thank you for the experience, and I'm glad we can have the conversation, and I made a mistake. And I took a shower, got out of the shower, called her up, And I don't know, I seem to have pissed the lady off with that even more, and she just instantly told me I was fired. So I went and got that job selling those Dutch shoes that I was wearing, which was an unbelievable experience, kind of a surreal experience at that point. I was already selling the shoes that I loved wearing, and that's really possible in New York City. I would recommend anyone move to New York City. Really, everything is possible. You're intermingling with movers and shakers, and celebrities are all walking around all the time. While I was there, I met, people like Matt Damon's brother, who I ended up managing a space where Matt Damon's brother was always trying to get in. And I got stories on stories. I could drop some names, but I really just want to keep it about moving to New York City right now. And I just remember there was a girl there that told me, don't forget to look up, because New York City was just, everything was happening at, all altitudes, right? Like on the street level, you could look up, you could see things happening, just unbelievable. It was also right around the time I think Heath Ledger passed. And so I remember walking my apartment. Once I moved into Manhattan, I moved into Chinatown. And that's where I lived for most of my time there, right on Elizabeth Street, which was a really cool apartment right across from the police station. Wasn't too far from Heath Ledger's apartment, where he was paying $28,000 a month. And I was just like, wow, what a crazy life. And he had died there. And so that was kind of special to me, because I had wanted to pursue acting. And so I, kind of going back to my roots, what I'd always wanted to do in entertainment. And I remember telling my boss at the shoe store after I had been mugged, I had gotten mugged by some guys coming into the shoe store. We kept our shoes below in the basement, and some young guys who weren't our typical clientele at all had come in and angrily asked if we had a shoe. Then I went downstairs to see if we had it, and no sooner had I gone downstairs than I heard stomps across the floor. I came back up, and they had stolen the laptop. We never got it back, and they never found those guys. Cops weren't just fast enough. It was the middle of the day, and the guys were wearing like tracksuits. So they should have been easy to see, but they didn't find them. My boss was like, you need to use your spidey sense. Didn't you see that they didn't belong in here? And anyway, that job was cool because I got to meet the designer of the red striped shoe of Prada, and I got to meet some other cool people. And I remember a friend of Lila's, this woman, Karen Kirkendall, who had used to live up there and was a movie starlet. And she was dying of cancer and doing a one-woman show down in Austin. She was from Austin and knew Lila, but she had lived in New York City for many years. And she was selling real estate at the same time. And Lila had given me her number because I kind of had parents that weren't super supportive of my dreams. And so I guess she thought this woman would be very supportive. This woman, Karen, was just a rock star. She was friends with one of the governors of Texas and had just basically done everything in life. She had gone on African safaris and all kinds of cool stuff. And what was so crazy is she would answer my call anytime I called, even if she was on the toilet, whatever, dying of cancer, and tell me, LG, you got to follow your gut. Seldom have I followed my gut and been wrong. Still the best advice I've gotten to this day. So follow your gut. If you don't, you'll be sorry. Better to follow your gut and not have any regrets. And she told me how brave and amazing I was for taking the plunge and moving to New York City. In fact, I think out of a lot of my peers, I was the first one to leave Texas and inspired a lot of other family, friends, kids to get up and move. And but yeah, Karen was my surrogate mother, and she really inspired me. So, you can't underestimate how your words impact people as they're pursuing their dreams. And I was calling both of my brothers. I'm the middle brother, and I got an older and a younger brother, both about 2 or 3 years on either side, so we're all pretty close in age. I called them up every day and said, "You gotta move up here. New York City is amazing. Everything's happening here. The energy is electric." And literally, the energy literally is electric in New York City. If you've never been there, it's absolutely insane. And I'm not just talking about Times Square. I'm talking about Brooklyn. I'm talking about the Bronx. I'm talking about Staten Island. You start going over into Jersey and it starts to slow down a little bit. But Union City's like that, right across the water in Jersey. And just an absolutely amazing city. Everything is happening all the time. I would end up going to work for MTV. I would end up getting my master's in acting, and I would end up getting into a movie not long after my father passed in a plane crash. I had a lot of crazy adventures. I'm going to share a lot more on this channel, but there's just a little intro into my life, and I hope to share a lot more. Let me know what you guys want to know more of if you like this video and made it to the end, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Don't forget you're the best.